Welcome to At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson, and we have the pleasure once again, and I don't know how many times it's been, but to talk for a half hour with Ray LaHood. Mr. LaHood, thank you for joining us. I hope this is not the last time that we have you on the program. But a little bit of history, just to refresh your memory, 1982 to 1994, Ray LaHood was on the staff, including Chief of Staff for Bob Michel. Then he took that seat, was elected in 94, serving 95 to 2009 on in Congress, representing the 18th Congressional District from Central Illinois, and then had the, can I say pleasure?
Absolutely.
To be Secretary of Transportation. How did that come about?
Well, really, it came about as a result of my friendship with then Senator Obama, who got elected president, who was looking to put some Republicans in his cabinet. He and I worked together as from the Illinois delegation, me as a congressman from Central Illinois, and he as a senator for the entire state, for our state of Illinois. And we became very good friends. And the idea of putting a Republican in his cabinet was not a political decision. It was something that he really believed in. And so after he was elected president, I went to Chicago on a very cold day in December, and we had a 40-minute conversation, and a week later he offered me the best job I've ever had in politics, Secretary of Transportation. And for 4.5 years, we carried out the president's agenda for transportation in the country and around the world.
We're going to talk about transportation era for Mr. LaHood. We're going to talk about his time in Congress, and we'll talk a little bit about personal. So we've started on transportation. Let's continue down that route, if I may use that term. What's the biggest, from your perspective, I've got some things I want to talk to you about, but what was the biggest success under the 4 years in transportation?
I think our safety agenda. We held the first distracted driving safety summit. We put distracted driving really at a level that now a lot of people are talking about it as a safety program, about how to get people to put down their cell phones and their texting devices while they're driving, how dangerous it is. We went from 18 states passing distracted driving laws to 41 states. We made a difference. We held 2 summits, and we persuaded people that distracted driving was a big problem for people to be able to drive safely. I also think raising the CAFE standards, the gasoline standards that the president asked us to do from what they currently are to 2025, they'll be 54.5 miles per gallon in 2025. That'll save a lot of gasoline, take a lot of CO2 out of the air. And I think the third thing, in addition to safety and raising the CAFE standards, is implementing the president's vision for passenger rail. The same kind of vision that Eisenhower had for the interstate, the president has had for more passenger rail in America, and investing $12 billion. And there are many other things, but I think those 3 are the ones that hopefully people will remember us for.
Then let's talk about high-speed rail. There were some disappointments. Wisconsin said no to the money. Just recently, a judge in California said, wait a minute, the public bonds, I'm not so sure about this. Did it progress the way you thought it should?
Well, we're off to a very good start because the president has a vision, because we invested $12 billion. That's 12 billion times more than has ever been invested, including over $4 billion in Illinois because of Governor Quinn's commitment to passenger rail. Over $4 billion in California, which over the next 10 years will build a passenger rail from San Francisco to San Diego that'll go 200 miles an hour. And we've invested a lot in the Northeast Corridor to extend Amtrak through Connecticut, up to New York and Massachusetts, and further south in North and South Carolina. So just as Eisenhower had a vision for developing the interstate system that, by the way, took 50 years to build, President Obama has a vision for passenger rail that'll probably take at least 25 years to build out in America.
So when we talk about high speed in Illinois, and I understand it's different speeds in different parts of the country, we went from 79 to 110, so
right.
a 30 mile an hour increase. Considering the $4 billion spent in Illinois, and I know some of that is in infrastructure, et cetera, that probably needed to be done, but that 30 miles an hour, what kind of difference does that make for all that money?
Well, what it makes is a difference in the ride. It's a smoother ride. It also allows for new equipment, not only new infrastructure, but new equipment, new cars, new engines, and really brings Illinois into the 21st century as far as the kind of equipment and infrastructure. It would be like rebuilding the interstate in a sense, rebuilding those tracks, having new cars, new engines. It's a different way for people to travel, and it gets people off the roadways.
Let's go back to roadways. You mentioned safety on the highway. I want to talk about safety in the air because you changed the hours that pilots are allowed to fly, right?
Yeah, the worst day in the job at DOT for me was when the Colgan air crash in Buffalo crashed. Yeah, 49 people perished. Every one of those people thought that they were going to arrive safely in Buffalo. But because of pilot error and lack of rest, the pilots did exactly the opposite of what they should have done when the plane iced up. And as a result of that crash, we implemented new training for pilots, more rest for pilots, and a longer period between which pilots can fly from one flight to the other. So those improvements have been good safety measures that I think will be helpful in the future.
Let's turn our attention to Congress because the half hour will get away from, you should be here for 2 hours, right? But let's turn to Congress. You were elected to replace Bob Michel.
Right.
And you, early on, in 1995, you were in Congress, and in a short amount of time, you presided over debates in Congress. You were presiding. Why was it that a man with very little seniority was put in a position to oversee many, many important debates, most notably the one over the impeachment of President Clinton?
Well, I think in part because Republicans hadn't been in the majority for 40 years. The majority party, which we became in '94 as a result of the election, not one person of that majority had ever presided over the House. And during the time that I was a staffer, chief of staff for Bob Michel, I had a chance to be on the House floor and observe other people presiding. I think people liked the style that I used, fairness, by the book, by the rules, giving everybody a chance to say whatever they wanted to say within the time frame that they had to say it, not supporting one side or the other, or supporting one argument or the other. The person in the chair has to be fair, they have to be balanced, they have to follow the rules. And I had a very good style of doing that, and Speaker Gingrich and his staff recognized that, and I believe that's why I was selected to chair the 2 days of impeachment for President Clinton.
As you talk about that balance, and I believe the impeachment hearings were in '98.
They were.
I recall. In about 1997 or so, you co-chaired retreats in Hershey, Pennsylvania, called it was a bipartisan retreat,
right,
to invite families and Congress members, etc. That was a different time. Was it successful, and why did it end after so many years?
We chaired 4 bipartisan retreats where we got members of Congress to come together for a weekend with their families, with their spouses, with their children. And it's the first time that a congressional spouse met another congressional spouse, first time congressional kids had a chance to meet other congressional kids. It's very easy to demonize someone. It's very easy to criticize someone when you don't really know them or you don't know their family. Years ago, when members of Congress were elected, they brought their families to Washington. They lived in Washington. They socialized together on the weekends. Now congressmen fly in on Tuesday and leave on Thursday, and while they're there on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, they're having fundraisers rather than working with their colleagues. These bipartisan retreats allowed for people to develop relationships, get to know people that lasted really well beyond their congressional careers. But it helped to forge a good understanding and friendships that really, I think, improved the Congress that I served in.
That was more than a decade ago, and we know that.
Yeah.
What's different now than in the 90s?
Well, I think in some instances you have people elected to Congress today that don't really believe in government, that really don't believe that government has a role to play, that believe that they got elected to come to Washington and vote no and to stop everything. And that's the reason Congress is well below 10% in popularity, because frankly, they haven't done much. If anything, they should be passing immigration reform, a farm bill, which we passed when we were there, always bipartisan, pass tax reform, pass a balanced budget. We passed 3 balanced budgets with Speaker Gingrich, a Republican, in control of the House, and Bill Clinton in the White House. They worked together. We passed welfare reform. Clinton didn't like it in the beginning, but they worked it out. They talked to one another. They believed that government had a role to play. Unfortunately, there are some people elected to Congress today that don't want to do anything, that don't believe in government, that don't believe government has a role to play in improving people's lives.
In the word compromise, and I always recall an interview I did with Bob Michael where he said, compromise is how you get legislation passed, as long as you don't dig into my principles. And that's the phrase he used. Don't
Sure.
dig into my principles, but I'll reach out and you reach out and we'll find some common ground right here.
Right.
There's no reaching?
There's no opportunity for people to compromise, because there are some people elected to Congress who don't believe in the word compromise, don't believe in consensus, don't believe in trying to work things out the way that other Congresses has done. We've had a rich history for 236 years in our country of people working things out. No one of the 435 in the House, no one of the 100 in the Senate gets their own way. The way that our country has solved its problems is through compromise, through discussion, through debate, and then being able to work things out. Unfortunately, there are people in Washington today elected to Congress who don't believe in that process.
Let's talk about another problem, and that is money. How much money is required? I just read an article where, on average, during any given weekday in Washington, D.C., there are more than 20 fundraisers going on for members of Congress. Has money destroyed maybe destroy is too strong of a word, but has it tainted the political process?
Well, people spend far too much money raising money. And when members of Congress are in Washington, if they're not voting on bills, if they're not on the House floor, they're probably having a fundraiser or going to somebody else's fundraiser. Far too much money has influenced our election process and influenced the time that members of Congress spend raising money in order to stay in office.
When you came into office, the Republicans swept in 1994, and I know Bob Michael wished he would have stayed around for another 2 years.
Could have been speaker, maybe.
But the contract with America, Newt Gingrich, you mentioned him. You were one of 3 people who did not sign that. Why did you not sign it? And in retrospect, was it a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, the contract with America was a very strong agenda. Many of those 10 items I voted for. I just felt that I wanted to have a contract with the people in my own district. I wanted people to know that I thought it was more important to balance the budget before we had these huge tax cuts. One of the main items in the contract with America, Newt called it the crown jewel, was the tax cuts. And I thought we ought to be putting the emphasis on balancing the budget, passing a balanced budget, which ultimately we did. And so I just felt we really should put the emphasis there. But on the 10 items, I voted for almost every one of them because they reformed Congress, they changed things, we made a difference. We were a group of people that believed there was a role for Congress and there's a role for government. And that's really what I was thinking about back then.
Looking at the Republican Party, the Tea Party has created a split. If you were back in Congress, what would you suggest in order to bring the Republicans back together?
Well, I do think that there have been efforts to work with within Congress. I know that there are people that are elected from our own area here, whether it's Congressman Schock or Congressman Bustos, who've talked about working across the aisle, working in a bipartisan way, really trying to forge the kind of opportunities that allow for compromise and consensus. But there has to be, at the leadership level, at the speaker level, at the minority leaders level, at the level where the leaders are, the opportunity for members to talk to one another, to work with one another, and to really make something happen. And we haven't seen much of that right now. A lot of it has to come from the leadership.
And that seems to be a wider split than ever before from my perspective.
That's right.
Senator Reid and Senator McConnell
Right.
are calling each other's names.
That's right.
And the same thing at the House level, Boehner and
Pelosi.
Pelosi
Right.
is...
Well, the members have to go to their leaders and say, look, we were elected to get things done. The reason we're at 9% popularity is because we don't do anything. And people recognize that. And next year, every one of these members will be up for re-election. What are they going to be able to talk about? What problems are they going to be able to tell people they've solved? I think there'll be a real groundswell among the members to say, hey, we've got to move on and get things done for America. Whether it's immigration reform, tax reform, a balanced budget, a farm bill, which means a lot to people in Central Illinois. These are important matters.
So how do we operate without a farm bill? A farm bill's traditionally been a 5-year bill. Mm-hmm. And now there's talk that maybe, and part of the problem is the SNAP program
Right.
is part of the farm bill.
Right.
And now ethanol has become a question mark
Right.
in the farm bill. How do you go about saying, well, I want to save some money because the House and the Senate differ in how much SNAP should be cut.
Right. Sit around a table like this, like people have always done, like people in communities do that serve on church boards, library boards, school boards. They sit around a table and they don't all agree, but in the end, they decide what's important and then they make things happen. And so you and I may disagree on how much we should spend on food stamps or SNAP or commodity programs or ethanol, but in the end, we have to say, for the greater good, for the farmers, for the producers, for the people that benefit from food stamps, let's reach a decision here. And that's the way it's always been done, and that's the way it should be done.
I know this is stepping outside of your history, but I want to talk about one thing in the Senate. Recently, the nuclear option was passed. The Democrats made 50 vote, or 51 vote, I guess we should say, rather than 60 vote to stop filibusters and to allow, in this particular case, particularly some judges to be appointed to the third appellate in D.C., which is next to the Supreme Court, probably the most important court in the land. There's a long tradition of 60 votes. Do you look at that as a political move? Is that a good move to change something like that?
I think it's a political move, and I think it's born out of frustration that a number of the judges that have been nominated by President Obama cannot get a vote, and that a decision was made last year by then Leader McConnell and Leader Reid that they wouldn't stand in the way just for political reasons of these nominees. And yet they've done it again this year. At the end, just recently, they stood in the way of these nominees for no reason, not because they're not qualified, because they are qualified, but for political reasons. So Senator Reid made a political decision. Let's give the president, his nominees, a vote in fairness to the nominee who's qualified for the job, who's been through a hearing, who's had to testify, who's had to answer questions. And so Senator Reid felt that in fairness to the people who are being nominated, that the process should work for them.
In the time remaining, let's talk a little bit about your personal life and a little bit of history first. You actually considered a run for governor back in '06.
I did.
Why did you decide against doing that?
Well, at the time, Governor Blagojevich was the governor. He was then considered a very strong candidate, and it would have taken an enormous amount of effort to raise the money, to get my name recognized in the Chicago suburban area, even though it was a recognized name around here. It wasn't that recognizable in the Chicago suburban area, where it costs a lot of money to advertise on television. And I decided I didn't want to spend the time raising all the money to do it.
Your name is easily recognizable on Main Street near Monroe Street
Yeah,
in Peoria.
yeah. Thank you. Thanks to the mayor. Thanks to Mayor Ardis. He was nice enough to honor me and my family by putting a blue sign up there that says Secretary Ray LaHood Boulevard or something like that. It was a nice honor.
And I laugh because I recall that your son Darren, of course, we know that he's in the state senate. It's the only time you've ever tried to influence his vote, because there's a vote coming up on part of I-74. You played a role in getting I-70, the upgrade.
$400 million project that at the time we were on the Appropriations Committee in Congress, and were fortunate enough to get the money made available to completely redo I-74, and now it's one of the safest roads in our community, and all widened and safe, so some of the state legislators have put a bill in to name part of the road in my honor. So,
and I mentioned Darren. He's stepped into politics. Do you have conversations about don't do that, Darren?
Not at all. No, I'm very proud of Darren. I'm proud of the fact that he thought enough of the work that we did while we were in elective office to consider doing it himself, and to seek the appointment when Dale Reisinger resigned, and then to seek election on his own. I think it shows that he has followed politics. He has followed public service. He thinks enough of the opportunity to continue to serve the community, and so we're very proud of the work that he's done.
Another son is Sam, and many of you may remember Sam ran into a little bit of trouble with the Egyptian government. He worked for the International Republican Institute, which is not associated with the Republican Party.
No, it's not.
It's an NGO.
It is.
What's his status with regard to that particular case?
Well, he was convicted in Egypt in absentia and sentenced to 5 years for what we believe are trumped-up charges. He's back in Washington working for IRI and in their office there, and doing administrative work. And we hope that eventually our government, once Egypt has an established government, which they don't right now, they've now are on their third iteration of an administration. Once they have a government, that these charges can be overturned and Sam can get back to the work that he loves doing, which is international work. But for now, he's in Washington.
Working for IRI.
Working for IRI, doing administrative work.
And you have a daughter?
I have a daughter here in Peoria, Sarah Smith, and she and her husband Brian have 2 children and one on the way.
I was going to say, number 11 would that be in grandchildren?
Number 11, that's right. And I have a daughter in Indianapolis. Her and her husband are both doctors, and they have 4 children. Mm-hmm. So we're blessed. And Sam has a little girl in Washington.
So do you and Kathy get to see all of them?
We certainly do. Yeah, we'll obviously spend the holidays with them, and every one of them is a great joy to us.
How much traveling do you want to do?
None. We've traveled the world, either through our work in Congress or through our work at DOT, and we've done a lot of traveling. I visited all 50 states when I was Secretary of Transportation, and over 225 cities. So we've seen the country and we've seen the world, and we like Central Illinois very much.
What's next for Ray LaHood? No, you're done with politics.
Done with politics. No more elective office. We'll live vicariously through Darren.
So what's on the agenda?
Well, we've just finished a book with our friend Frank Mackaman, the head of the Dirksen Congressional Research Center. It's a book about our time in Congress and a book about our time at DOT and being a Republican in a Democratic administration, working with what I believe will be one of the most historic administrations in the history of our country. Hopefully the book will be out next year. It's 15 chapters. Frank is a very good wordsmith, and I'm very grateful to him for helping me really put on paper my life's career, my 35 years of public service. And so a number of people have been talking to us about further opportunities for service, and we're listening to everybody, and eventually we'll decide what the next chapter will be.
When's the book come out?
Hopefully next spring or summer.
A publisher already lined up?
Publisher lined up, Cambria, and we look forward to being able to talk about our service.
A final thought. I was looking back, and Bob Michael is a graduate of Bradley University.
That's right.
Served for 38 years in Congress,
right,
representing this district.
Right.
You're a Bradley grad. Aaron Schock, your successor, a Bradley grad. Is there something, a commonality there? What's what is it about Bradley University?
Well, I think all three of us are hometown people. All three of us grew up in Peoria. We knew the influence of Bradley on Central Illinois and that it's a great institution. And I think Laura Bradley would be very proud.
I think she would be. And I think there's a lot of Central Illinoisans proud of you, Ray.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Thank
joining
you,
us
Rich.
once again on At Issue.
Thank you.
And congratulations on retirement.
Thank you.
And we'll be back next week with another edition of At Issue. And we're going to be, I don't even know what the schedule calls for. We'll be surprised next week. I think I've already taped it, but we'll be surprised next week as to who is on. I think we're looking at either Sherry Bustos or Aaron Schock to be joining us, depending on the congressional schedule. So just pay attention to the promos on the air and we'll tell you who's going to be on. See you then.